Is here and it will not be televised, but it is being digitized for everyone's benefit. The big question is, what will it change? An industry report pegs the fintech industry in India to grow up to $150 billion within the next 5 years. Already over 2,000 fintechs strong, with the majority of them having set up shop in the last 5 years alone. This industry has grown undeterred by the pandemic and in fact has gone on to produce, I think, at least 8 unicorns in terms of valuation since January last year. But realizing this potential opportunity will need investments estimated to the tune of 20 to $25 billion, which lends a multinational angle to the entire story. So let's see which way the winds are blowing with our thought leadership discussion today, titled The Era of FinTech, Ushering a New Age in Banking. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and today I will be speaking to leaders from India and the UK's banking and fintech ecosystem on the role of fintech firms in reimagining banking and opportunities for cross-border collaboration between the UK and India. Let me quickly introduce the panel to you. Joining us are Puneet Sood, the head of India for the NatWest Group; Biju K, who heads operational risk and is the chief information security officer at Federal Bank; Saurabh Tiwari, the chief technology officer at Policy Bazaar; Peter Cunan, who leads national and international strategy at Innovate Finance, which is an independent industry body that represents and advances the global fintech community in the UK; Hemant Gala, vice president of financial services and payments at PhonePe; Nikhil Kamath, the co-founder and CIO at Zerodha; Alan Chang, who is the senior vice president of revenue and operations at Revolut, which is a British-based digital banking app that aims to build the world's first truly global financial super app; and finally, Anita Pai, the chief operating officer at Yes Bank. As you can see, we have covered the entire gamut of the financial services space, so this looks set to be a well-rounded discussion. But before we begin the Q&A with the panel, we're joined by Alderman William Russell, the Lord Mayor of the City of London, to present the opening remarks for this session. Let's listen in.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you to DIT for hosting and organising this vital event. I say vital because the innovations we are discussing here today will one day cease being innovations, and they will simply become the way we do things. Over the last few years, FinTech has become a major part of the City of London's offer, an important topic for any Lord Mayor. As I'm sure you're all aware, the UK has long been at the forefront of financial services. And because of this historical foundation, the UK has been able to develop its offer with innovation and technology, which has truly set us apart. We are a magnet for global fintechs and investors, and the UK makes up around 10% of the global fintech market. And these institutions have remained resilient and agile during the lockdown, with many companies able to adapt their offer and meet customer needs during the pandemic. This work is partly why we continue to see high levels of funding and support for these industries. We also now have a clear direction set for the future of FinTech, thanks to the government's FinTech review, a review which saw the City of London work closely with Westminster to support the whole UK.
Thank you, Lord Mayor Russell, for sharing your thoughts with us. Let's get down to business, shall we? The first question, of course, to all the speakers to kind of get the ball rolling, and we want to kind of understand the broad contours of the role that FinTech is playing when it comes to reimagining financial services and products. So let's go around the table and see what our panelists, first of all, think about FinTechs, the very concept. Puneet, we'll start with you. We had a discussion on this earlier on the purpose that fintech serve for the broader ecosystem. Do you want to expand on that and talk about how you see fintech reimagining financial services and products?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gautam, for that. Traditionally, banks have always been about how can you safely store money, how can you safely move money from one place to another, and how can you lend money. So in a very traditional sense, those are the three basic pieces which are there, and banks actually became big and grew around that. Now, during initial years, the part which was missed out around that was really around what is the customer experience in that area, and what is the context of the customer experience in that. And I think FinTech has stepped into the space. It's woken up the more embedded traditional banks like ours, and they are focusing so much on the customer experience, making sure that the customers can do things the way they want to do it, the context of it, so that the customer does not need to come to it, but it is embedded into the lifestyle and becomes fairly ubiquitous. So I think it's been a very fundamental shift which is happening in the way we look at financial services, really. FinTech has played that part of a change agent and a catalyst.
All right, a change agent. That's the initial remark coming in from Puneet. Let's get the banks in first, and then we can go to the digital native players, so to say. Anita, you want to start things off on how you see FinTech reimagining the whole entire financial services?
Under the ecosystem of banking, and most especially in the payments ecosystem, I think has, if you ask me, a very welcome step. What happens is, if you ask me, the banks have products and all customer segments. But what FinTech is able to do is pick up maybe a product, maybe pick up part of
Anita, we seem to be having some issues with your line. If you could repeat your last line, there seems to be a bit of latency. So if you could repeat the last line which you said, you mentioned about the payments ecosystem. You could go on from there.
Yeah, so I think that I think having FinTech part of the ecosystem, the banking payments ecosystem is a very welcome step. With the availability today of data, of analytics, of the mobile phone, and ability to get KYC, etc., done seamlessly, which has been one of the changes that has happened over the last few years. And the FinTechs have been able to fill up those gaps. The banks have basically catering to all products and all customer segments. The FinTech has been to pick up maybe a product or maybe one part of a product journey and using insights to
Okay, we seem to be again having an audio issue with you, Anita. So we'll come back to you. We'll address that and we'll come back to you. Unfortunately, there seems to be an audio buffering issue, which we'll resolve. But as you mentioned, banks have been covering all sorts of products when it comes to using technology to improve the customer experience. We'll get your views on that later as we address your issue. Biju, if we could come to you quickly, your views on how you see FinTech reimagining financial services and products. What's your view on that?
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so like no, the panelists like Puneet that you also rightly mentioned the word reimagining. So that is the keyword with regard to FinTech. So like no, from manual banking, now all banks, particularly even in India and across the world, has moved to digitization, and now in the present era, all banks are working in a totally automated environment. But the basic difference what FinTech has brought in is that so while banks were good at improving the automation level, so FinTech really helped in reimagining the way banking was delivered to the customers. Basically, what FinTech really helped is that in line with the India stack, basically like the paperless, presence-less, and the cashless. So the FinTech really helped in redefining the way the banking service were delivered to the end customer. So we again going back to the India stack, the presence-less bank methodology. So like using Aadhaar and eKYC, and then again using DigiLocker, etc. So it was made available to the customer to open a bank account from their home without even having a photocopy of any of the documents, etc. like that. So FinTech really helped in redefining the way banking was delivered. That was one of the major advantage uh, that happened to the banking, particularly in India also.
All right. But when we look at the broader payment stack, let's see what the digital native players have to say. Saurabh, we'll start with you, then we'll come to Hemant, and we'll get Nikhil's view on this as well. Your understanding of the role that FinTech is playing in reimagining financial services and products. What's your view?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks to be here actually. And I think it was very well started by Puneet. I would say banks, insurance companies have been largely working on a very traditional model so far. And in the last few years, the way we have reimagined the entire story of financial services, it has really added a lot to the consumer experience. The theme is now shaping towards consumers' experience, and fintechs have a very great role to play. And I do belong to a category which has been in existence for a long time. Insurance is something which is not new. But we had happened to be the digital player who has been trying to chart down the journey for a consumer on a digital platform from last 12 years. And I do remember 12 years back when I was used to tell my friends that I'm gonna basically sell insurance online, they used to smile and say that after studying so much, why are you selling insurance? You didn't have any better work to do, because that used to be seen as a work which is largely done by agencies and agents. So we have reimagined the entire space and we have started digitalization of the processes, but somewhere our technology partner ecosystem has been evolving at a slower pace than what was anticipated. So the progress has been done. Customers have started taking the advantages of it, and I think the recent pandemic has kind of only pushed it north. And I'm very hopeful as things are shaping up now further on the digitalization piece. The entire experience on insurance purchase through fintech ecosystem will only become better. And the kind of payment ecosystem that is evolving in the last 2 years, that's admirable. I mean, we are going way good in India, and that is only supporting us to make the purchase of any financial product a lot more affordable, a lot more convenient. So that's a good thing, and I'm just leaving it on to this payment side because you want to discuss payment next. Yeah.
Sure. Hemant, the big vote of confidence from Saurabh for you. And as I described in the opening, I mean, we've got, I think, 8 unicorns in this space right now. And since January last year, we've had 3 unicorns. And this is an industry which seems undeterred despite the pandemic. So where do you see things now and where do you see things moving now?
And where we stand today, we've seen a massive adoption of digital payments in the country. I mean, I would say we are at a point, in an industry where, network effects literally kicks in. And this is what we have seen now for the last 12 months. We're literally seeing a network effect kicking in with almost 10 to 15, 20 million new customers coming onto the digital bandwagon. So it's not just about, trying, adopting, but it has become a way of life. Digital payments has become mainstream in our country. And it is, while there were, I think, 2 factors which really led to it. Demonetization was the first factor which led to some kind of adoption. But COVID really triggered that engagement with the customers in a big way, because people realized the need for being able to pay in a contactless environment, the need for able to solve for their daily use cases and needs in their life. But overall, I think to the question when you say, if you really look at it, what has changed, I think to Saurav's point, it was about reimagining the overall user experience in all aspects of their life. It is about, the way customer engaged for their payments and financial needs. And, right from being able to, address their daily use cases to be able to send money. I mean, just to send money, no one had imagined 5 years back that you could do it in literally 5 seconds in a country like India. And in a complete interoperable, open ecosystem. So the way UPI evolved as a platform, the way payment systems have evolved and the way they have scaled, it has led to in a massively complex ecosystem at the back end, but the reimagining of the back end has led to a fantastic front end experience for the customers, which has triggered a massive adoption. So I think any new cycle and anything new, it takes a lot of time to change habits. What we have seen is in the entire cycle of educating the customers and leading to adoption and engagement is a long cycle. That is what we really put our effort behind it. And when you look at reimagining, It is about trying to educate, getting them to adopt and do that first, second transaction in all areas, and then getting them to, engage continuously on various use cases that you develop with the customers on the app. What has also happened, I think we've covered, two other points, is that there's a massive unlocking of data and the ability for the customers to be able to leverage their data very effectively. We are a big believer of privacy and the power of data in the customer's hand. It is also a factor which is where the availability of data is given room for players to think, innovate, improve the way customers engage on the product, the way they buy product, the way their journeys are, or just the way the benefits that come to them. On a lot of areas, data is really playing out. And finally, I think it is also about partnership. FinTech is not an industry by itself. It is about an ecosystem that is all playing together. And players today are coming very effectively in trying to create four very strong partnerships. Banks playing the role of powering a lot of stuff. Us playing the role on reimagining the customer experience. So it is a mix of both, which is really played out very effectively. Be it on payments, be it on Jam, Dandan, Aadhaar, Trinity, be it on any other platform. You need to have players partnering effectively, giving room to each other to set new product solutions and new experiences.
Okay. That's an important point you mentioned there, the importance of partnerships. We'll come to that and I'll discuss that aspect with Peter and Alan as well. But coming to you, Nikhil, just like the payments universe saw a rapid transformation and a rapid adoption as the pandemic set in, the equities universe also saw a sort of a roller coaster ride where markets dipped substantially, then they rose substantially. And we are seeing a lot of retail participation also coming in the equity space. So your opinion, your opening remarks in terms of how you have seen FinTechs reimagining financial services and products. Nikhil, can you hear me? I think your audio is on mute because we can't hear you.
1 second.
Yes, we can just hear your audio now. Right. So if you've heard my question, if you could address that, your view, considering the transformation we have seen in the payments universe, we've also seen a transformation in the equities universe and, the markets, the way they were and the way they are now. How do you see FinTechs reimagining financial services and products, considering we are seeing increasing retail participation in the markets as well?
Yeah, so we're still talking of a very small base here. We have seen a lot of people coming over the last 12 months. The pandemic has definitely exaggerated prevailing trends of more people doing stuff online versus the traditional way of calling their broker. But you have to remember, we're talking about a base which is maybe 1.5% to 2% of the country which has direct or indirect access to financial markets. When you compare this to anywhere else in the world, I think especially to our Western peers, the penetration would be something like 50-60%. So even though we're talking about increased participation and all that has happened up until now, I think it is important to remember how small it still is. I think if our entire narrative of financial inclusion and the 5 trillion economy has to be met, I think this number, the amount of people who invest in equity classes in India has to grow up significantly.
Okay, that's another important point. Considering the small base we are in, there is a lot of opportunity, but things have to be done right, both from a policy and a business perspective, to grow this base exponentially. All right, let's come to Peter and Alan for their views. Peter, you've heard all the players in India speak about their experiences. You've heard some of the experience which UK has had, as we've heard from the Lord Mayor, that it's 10% of the global fintech market. So let's try to understand that experience which the UK had in the fintech space and see how it's relevant to the Indian context. Your answer to the question of how you see fintechs playing a role in reimagining financial services and products.
Sure. Thank you.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you to everyone today. From our experience, it's been, and as the Lord Mayor said, it's been really important to note the partnership possibilities between broader financial services and technology. And we see FinTech very much as a part of that development, but with a hope that in the near future, we're talking more broadly about financial services in the whole and the innovation that takes place across finance and brings the technological aspects to the fore through innovation across financial and professional services here in the UK. And that's certainly been our experience in recent years. And the development of the ecosystem here, the ability for businesses to connect with the large and small with each other, it's very much where Innovate Finance comes to play. And the opportunity, of course, for the encouragement from government, from regulators, crucially, in the development of the ecosystem here has been really important in that as well. Without those sorts of partnerships, without that sort of infrastructure being put in and encouraged in the first place, we wouldn't have the ecosystem that allows for the growth of those sorts of partnerships and has allowed in recent years for the growth of some of the more successful and well-known financial services operators that would call themselves FinTechs. And we have Revolut and Alan on the call here, and you just look at the success of a business like that, and that's only been possible. Or it's been possible because of obviously the competitive drive of the business, but also because of that ecosystem and that regulatory and policy environment that's enabled the growth of technology across our financial services here. I think that's been key. And what's also been key is the ability of the UK to translate this into an international opportunity as well, and the opportunity to obviously connect with like-minded ecosystems around the world based on some of those previous financial services relationships, of course, but actually to translate that into something more innovative for the future.
All right, let's hope so. Alan, coming to you. As I mentioned in the introduction, Revolut aims to be the world's first financial super app, as I read on your website. So, taking in your mission statement, how would you like to answer the question of how fintechs are playing a role in reimagining financial services and products, as Revolut has done with digital banking?
Sure. So if you look at the last 5 years, right, we've been, and many other players have been aiming to give customers more control, more visibility, and also giving traditionally inaccessible financial services to our customers, right? But this is all leveraging existing financial infrastructure. So leveraging things like open banking, building things such as budgeting, analytics, savings vaults, etc., right? Which basically solves a lot of the customer problems leveraging existing infrastructure. So I think next 5 to 20 years, there'll be another step change in customer experience, right? But the only way to achieve that is to reimagine, financial infrastructure and go deeper and deeper into the financial value chain. That's certainly how we see it, and that's certainly where I think the industry is going. Another trend we see will be, building, great, layers of abstraction, right, in fintech, right, to enable a lot more B2C companies, right, to go into fintech. For example, AWS for banking, right. So I think there'll be many touch points to enhance and build like ecosystems within B2C companies in the next 5 to 20 years.
All right. And again, an important point, as Alan has mentioned, we need to reimagine financial infrastructure itself if we want to make the advances as we go forward and it truly delivers its potential. And as Alan has mentioned, customers, well, the promise of fintechs is that it gives customers more control, more visibility, and more access. Let's build up on that point. Puneet, what kind of consumer trends do you see driving fintech innovations? What's your opinion on that? Since you believe on the solutions aspect of it, that the role of fintechs is to solve consumer problems, what sort of consumer trends do you see driving fintech innovations?
Gautam, for me, the top 3 trends I would talk about is probably voice, data, and AI. Voice, because as we have started with Alexa and Siri and Google Home and everything else, and we are seeing how people are becoming comfortable with it increasingly. I think that for the younger generation, you won't be able to easily step back. And there are some reports which are even talking about the fact that potentially as early as 2025, about half of the world's e-commerce shopping could be happening through voice activation. And I think I would like to look upon that as being one of the FinTech sort of areas of how we would drive it. And what's important in that voice one, Gautam, which I just want to call out, is that would necessarily assume that the underlying entire transaction flow is, digitized. So there is, so it's not just the front end I'm trying to talk about, but I'm talking about the entire fulfillment, the entire financial transaction underneath it. The other two also very briefly, Gautam, the data part of it is really around the fact that, and if I wear my traditional bank lens a little bit on it, the bigger banks have a lot of data but are struggling to how you figure out how you get the right analytics out of it. And how do you get new data which will make that more effective when you are still in that older mode? That's really it. AI, I think, is really a no-brainer, because I think AI is going to spread into every single area where, I don't know how to word it, but where you don't need social cues to make decisions, AI can step in and replace a lot of that. And so I think these are three trends which are going to be.
All right. Voice, data, and AI. That's Puneet's view on this. Peter, what's your thought on this topic of consumer trends driving fintech innovations? Let's get a global perspective on this question.
We've already heard open banking mentioned, and that's been really important for the UK and for India as well. And that's one of the keys really to unlock that crossover between innovation and financial services, and certainly has been here. It creates and supports the products and services that are able to draw in the consumers to this new digital world and this new digital way of doing finance, and that's been really important here. In terms of other trends that we're seeing here, we are seeing more on the regulatory side as well, in the RegTech space in particular, but also digital ID. Again, cuts into the open banking space. The development of digital ID products just makes everything faster. And certainly in the last 12 months, when we look at the wave of the pandemic and the impact that that's had on all our lives, here in the UK, that ability for end consumers and previous non-consumers of financial services to easily access finance, whether it's an individual or a business, using the technology, using the apps, using digital ID, and all these things combined has been really important. And I think we'll see that continue to accelerate.
All right. And Nikhil, your view on this, considering, we saw the share of active clients with fintech brokers going up from 43%, I think, to 57% in this time frame that we're talking about. It's been a major impetus, but let's not forget there were other impetuses like GST, demonetization, whole host of factors. So in a way, the consumer demand was tied into external factors. But now that consumers are sold on to the idea of using apps like yours to do a variety of things they wouldn't have done earlier, what consumer trends do you see now?
We used to have people who are in their mid-30s as the average age. That has come down to about 30. With a newer customer, with a millennial, I think they're a lot more open to trying new forms of technology. Everything from what Puneet mentioned earlier, like voice or any new form of technology. I think somebody who's not accustomed to doing things in a certain way, and somebody who is younger is more willing to try it and test new stuff. There have been a bunch of regulatory changes in our industry, which have made it harder for speculators to kind of thrive. So, Gautam, a large part of the turnover that happens in our country today is not the investing crowd, but it is the speculative crowd which trades on an intraday basis, which trades on leverage, who operate in the derivative market. I would attest as much as 85-90% of the turnover to that crowd, and only 10% of the actual volume is the investor who's buying in for the long term. So I think a lot needs to change, much less from the technology standpoint, because I think at least in this space, technologically, I think we are quite competitive with the rest of the world, and we have evolved in many ways faster than the Western peers.
Hmm.
But I think there needs to be a lot of rationalization around regulation and taxation in the industry, which will make it more favorable for the smaller investor to allocate a certain portion of his assets into equity.
Hmm. All right. Let's see what the traditional banks have to say about the problems that it solves. What we are looking at in terms of the solutions that fintechs bring when it comes to customer experience or risk management. We'll get Anita back in. Hopefully, the audio problem is solved for Anita. So, segueing into this topic about how financial fintech innovations have reimagined traditional processes which are involved in banking, whether it's customer experience or risk management. What major bottlenecks in banking is fintech helping to eradicate? You share with us a few use cases. We'll come to Anita first, and then we'll come to Biju for his view from the federal bank perspective. Anita?
Yeah, so I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, you are.
So I think the basic use case that one can talk about. First of all, I should say that yes, bank is probably an answer to a lot of the electronics. So we may not be that traditional a bank in terms of the way we do business. Having said that, I think a couple of things. So, for example, if I look at what is the customer looking for in terms of convenience, he's looking for saying things like, say, let me send now today. What it means is two things simultaneously. One, provide a certain amount of credit to the customer, as well as ensure that the payment is made seamlessly with all speed and convenience. This is something which which brings into different parts of a bank, which is lending and payments, not lending but credit and payments, and it extremely
Sorry, could you repeat the line about, you said lending and payments. If you could repeat after that, unfortunately, we lost your line there. So you mentioned lending and payments. You could continue after that.
I said that it brings together two parts of banking at the same time. That is providing a certain amount of credit and making sure that the payment happens seamlessly and with speed. These are areas where fintech and the banks can collaborate very well and provide customer with a great experience. A feature or functionality that the customer really looks forward to. I think either one of them could probably not have to make the customer happy.
Okay, so speed and convenience when it comes to lending and payments. That's just to summarize what you have said. That's one of the major bottlenecks which fintech has sort of addressed for traditional banking. Biju, your perspective on this question, the major bottlenecks which have been resolved thanks to fintech in traditional banking.
Yeah, so like now, so the major advantage of partnering with fintechs is that from my perspective, one of the most important one is providing an end-to-end seamless experience to the customers. For example, when we say about conducting banking through mobile, so almost all banks, say in India, have in one way or other have a mobile banking app. And so having said that, but the banking customers are from various backgrounds, various ages, they use various technology. Within Android itself, they will be having various kinds of OS, right from Android 5.5 to the latest one, like similarly in iOS. So when a bank provides a mobile app to the customers may have various kinds of problems in completing the task. So identifying that task on a real-time or on a near real-time basis and helping the customers then and there itself to resolve their problems. So that is one major issue to provide, which normally banks face when we try to provide a seamless experience. So the problem may not be with the bank or with the technology, maybe with the awareness level of the customers, or maybe with one of the technology which the customer is using, like an outdated app OS they may be using. So timely identifying these issues extending support to the customer to resolve the issue. So like that, one of the speaker earlier mentioned, the fintechs are very good in analyzing the large chunk of data that is available and making use of AI, ML to analyze what went wrong and timely sharing that information both to the technical support team and also extending a support to the customer to resolve that issue. So basically, in providing a seamless experience to enjoy the digital banking methodologies, so the fintechs lend a great help to the financial institutions. So that is like while both sides, the bank as well as the fintech have the adequate technologies, the specialization may be in different areas for the bank and the fintech. So a combination of the fintech and the bank's technical experience as well as the banking experience helps in providing better experience to the customer. So that is one of the use case which we have seen.
Okay. So that's the perspective from Yes Bank and Federal Bank on the bottlenecks which the fintech revolution has helped solve. But we also can't ignore the disruption in infrastructure which is needed, and Alan touched upon this point, which is we need a reimagining of the infrastructure, financial infrastructure itself, if we need to move on to the next level. And since we have say the payments industry, which is at the vanguard of advancement in fintech revolution, let me address this question to the payments guys, to Hemant. Fintech has come a long way from being used as a back end of financial institutions. So how do you see the industry now shaping up in the next few months, considering this very reimagining of infrastructure itself required? What do you think about this?
I think the industry is shaping up in a very interesting way. There is a massive scale up of.
Hemant, if you could speak into your mic so that the audience can hear you clearly, that would be fantastic.
Am I not audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Just a little bit. Your voice is unfortunately a bit low. So if you can speak into the mic a bit loudly, we can all hear you clearly.
Okay. Is this clear now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. How do we see industry shaping up in the next few months? There is going to be there's a plethora of things that are right now happening. Right from, I think it's going to be largely around three things where it centers around. One is about reliability. Second is about speed, and third is being about how do you service the customer. With the scale at which we are operating, you have to be very reliable in the service that you are promised. It's the promise of being able to move money or being able to pay. So it has to be an extremely reliable, scalable platform that you are building on. It has to be something which works on speed with higher success rates. People are making payments in the real-time environment. They're at merchant outlets. They're with someone. They want to process transactions. So it has to be about speed with very high degree of success rates. It can't be, going into pending state. It can't be delayed. It has to have an assurance that it will meet the kind of success rate that it needs. That the customer is really wanting to. The third and the most important aspect is about how do you really service the customer at the scale. I mean, we have today more than 40 million transactions a day, and we do more than upwards of 280, 300 million transactions. And overall, industry on UPI is over 1 billion transactions. Our overall platform, we are seeing massive number of transactions. So at the scale, and you have to be really using ML and AI to be able to address customers. So we have deeply invested in bots today. Upwards of 80% of our customer transaction resolutions happen through very intelligent chat bots. They predict. They just don't react. It can't be reactive anymore in saying customers reach out to me, can I react? It has to be predictive, saying he's done a transaction, if the transaction's failed. We proactively tell customers, saying, look, this transaction failed. This is the issue. It will get resolved in 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 day. We'll get back to you, and we keep updating. So you can't be reactive in today's environment. Going forward in this case, you have to be very proactive in managing customers' expectations. And it has to be automated. You can't have physical head sitting in and addressing. You have to have a very high degree of, along with more than AI, ML really works very deeply here, where you create a rule engine which addresses various instances linked to the transaction. So it has to be going forward. This year and next few months, when you look at the back end of financial institutions, when it achieves scale, it has to then become more reliable, more scalable, more success rates, and has to be able to service customers very proactively.
All right, reliability, speed, and servicing the customers. It's a very important point, and I'd like to bring in Saurabh at this point to get his views on this topic as well. And what Hemant has pointed out is very right, which is the scale is the big issue. I mean, a new report from Deloitte India has said that fintech companies are growing at the rate of 13 times to 70 times over the last 2 years. So as we talk about transactions going from tens of millions to hundreds of millions, it brings up new opportunities and new problems as well. So how do you sort of see the industry shaping up in the next few months?
Yeah, I think very interesting. I will just add on to what Hemant was saying because that will make the entire equation a little balanced. So a few things which we have realized over a few years that there are certain things which are equally important from a customer perspective. One is the convenience, and second is affordability. See, while the demand of various products is going up, right? There's an affordability segment also rising in the market. For example, if I just take in our business in insurance, there was a time when people were looking out for insurance product, but there were many who were losing jobs also, and they wanted to have an option where they can buy insurance product on an EMI basis. And industry has come a way forward and had put up certain solution where consumers can buy product on a low cost EMI or zero cost EMI basis. So that's the kind of innovation has started coming in, and that is largely because of affordability. One more problem which we face, and I think which has not been discussed in this forum so far, but I feel that is all across, whether it's the insurance industry, it's a banking, I think coming out of legacy is a major issue. And the industry has been there for a while, and it's been like 20 odd years, 30 years, people have been thinking about digitalization. But the way things are shaping up in last 2 years, 3 years, it was never been the case. So what people have started doing that they kept the legacy aside and they have started building kind of a parallel infrastructure to meet the consumer expectations and demands and started creating convenience for the consumer. So legacy handling is a big challenge for a lot of our players, and those who have been the new age banking, they probably don't need to face that, but the ones who have been in the industry for a while, they are dealing with it, whether it's an insurance company or banks, I would say.
Okay.
And for us, I think it's a pure digital business, as Hemant was telling, big data, AI/ML, these are the mainstream technologies for us. We also see the areas where we have to handle the fraudulent transactions on a regular basis. We have to build in intelligence when the volumes of transactions are growing. We also need to be very careful that we don't end up basically having any kind of fraud happening in our system. So we are very proactive in prohibiting ourselves from such kind of activities. So there are many use cases where we use AI/ML in the mainstream.
All right, those are the challenges and opportunities which Saurabh has outlined, and we are running out of time, so I'll bring in more perspectives quickly. But a quick reminder also to the audience to keep your questions coming in the chat window, and it will be great if you specify who your question is addressed to. So what we can do is, as we wrap up the panel discussion, we can maybe take a question or two from the audience and address it to the specific speakers. Bringing Alan in. Alan, you heard Hemant and Saurabh talk about how things are and how things are about to shape up. And as we spoke of scale, as I mentioned that, fintech companies in India have grown a staggering 13 times to 70 times, and that brings scale of transactions into question. It also brings an opportunity. So what kind of cross-border collaboration can we expect with respect to fintech between India and the UK, especially post-Brexit, and what kind of untapped growth opportunities do you see in the country currently?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So, Revolut is actually, when we first started Revolut, we've always been, want to build a global financial super app, right? So actually the recent trend of remote working as a result of COVID actually helped accelerate to that, trend of, the world is getting smaller. And, we're all about breaking financial borders, right? We never really believe, geographical borders, physical borders, or even legal borders are, barriers to, accessing financial services, right? Even though traditionally has always been like that. So I think, this huge trend of remote working would, drum up a lot of consumer demand in cross-border financial services. right? And for example, if you take Revolut, we plan to hire over 300 people in India in the next 2 years because we see India as a huge talent hub, right? Where traditionally, previously before COVID, we could not hire talent fast enough, right? Because we're confined by physical location, proximity to offices, right? Now we've gone remote, right? We see India as the number one talent hub outside the UK, right? So yeah, I think it's a lot of opportunities for UK and India to work together, and as a result of this new trend, and Rev is definitely riding on this trend.
Okay, Peter, let's get your perspective on this question. The UK and India have built world-leading fintech companies. What can the expertise in each geography bring to the other?
Sure. I think there's a lot of opportunities right now for international expansion. I think post-COVID, there is going to be increased demand from markets around the world for the types of products and services that you see in both the UK and India. And I think rising to that increased digitalization challenge is an opportunity for all. I think, as the Lord Mayor mentioned in his opening remarks, we've been through a process of review recently. The Khalifa Review of UK FinTech, published last month, highlighted our international expertise and our great capacity to build out those connections to overseas markets and to encourage UK businesses to think about how they can expand globally, and in partnership with overseas companies and also for overseas companies looking to invest in the UK as well, what opportunities there are there. And building on the success of previous initiatives like the FinTech Bridges, future digital trade opportunities, future trade agreements, even post-Brexit between the UK and other governments. I think that the review took in a lot of that and looked at how we can strengthen the international infrastructure for businesses looking to maneuver around the world and take advantage of the climate that we now find ourselves in. So I think we're going to see a lot more around the international openness of the UK post-Brexit, but also post-COVID. I think we're going to see lots of opportunities everywhere.
All right. Puneet, let me quickly get you in as well. Considering the rapid digitization that we have seen due to COVID, what kind of opportunities do you see emerging for banks and financial institutions, taking into context the perspective we've heard from both the India side of the story and the UK side of the story?
So Gautam, I want to look at this it's not just about India, UK. And, I just want to be sure that when we talk about banking and FinTech, it is FinTech and traditional banks. It is not or, and it is not versus each other.
Okay.
I think, for traditional banks to be able to leverage the partnerships with the right fintechs to elevate the customer experience, or a fintech to work with a traditional bank to get a huge customer base with which to actually test and leverage and roll it out, I think that partnership is key to elevating the entire industry, because at the end of the day, yes, it is about unicorns, but I think it's about in which, and the countries, the growth happens, and that the financial inclusion also happens. So I'm looking at it as both coming together, and that's where I think boundaries are dissolving today. So when we talk UK and India, I think it's about trying to see that a bank in India does not just have to look at a fintech in India and say, how can you help elevate me? But it's location agnostic. And that's the lens which I think which should be applied. And I'm again talking more from a traditional banking perspective, that the world is the stage when you want to look at which fintechs you want to engage with to help you and them. So you can have real win-wins in the fintech and traditional bank situation.
All right. Well, the fintech space also continues to present a very complex marketplace, though, with multiple players coming in on board. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. But let me address this question to the panel. In such a scenario, how can a fintech organization differentiate itself? That's a big question. Hemant, you want to start things off on this? How do you see the differentiating factor working here? Because as I mentioned, we've got 2,000 plus fintechs already in, and the scale of growth is immense. More and more players are coming in, which brings to fore the question of differentiation. How do you differentiate yourself from others? So what's your quick view on this?
I think you have to be continuously looking at what problems in customers' lives that you are trying to solve for. What value are you adding in customers' life, and how is that and then getting enhanced on your platform? So the real differentiation is what value do you add to customers' life for us, and we've been continuously on it and creating multiple use cases. We started as a P2P app where you could send money instantly over one account to another. Then we moved into use cases like recharge, bill payment, and other payments. And we moved into a very differentiated app-in-app platform, created more than 18 million offline merchants with QR-led strategy, and keep trying to add more value in customers' life. Such that you become ubiquitous in every aspect of their life. That is where our whole strategy is around creating differentiation.
All right, Alan, what's your view on this? With so many players in this space, how do you differentiate yourself? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, it's all about solving customer problems, right? We always pick the largest problem to solve, right, and then work our way downwards. And the second, I would say, I mean, this is really for any company, it's access to talent, right? So we are one of the first companies to respond quickly, for example, to this remote trend, right? And we already have, for example, 40 people in right working for us. Of which actually 20 of them are working for our global HQ teams, and only 20 of them are working for the Indian market, right? So it's about two things really: solving the biggest customer problems, and two is solving them well and solving them fast, which is really down to talent and how much you have.
All right. So if it's about solving customer problems, Saurabh, let me address this question to you. What major pain points is digitizing helping insurers with? How do you stand out from the competition?
Yeah, I think everyone talked about the consumer side of the problem. That's important for sure. If you don't solve any consumer problem, you are not going to be in the market for sure. I mean, that's clear. I think we are operating in a very traditional industry. We also solve a lot of insurers' problems as well. So they act as our partner ecosystem. We work very closely with them. We tend to be the front end for them to handle the consumer experience and solve a lot of problems which have been existing for a while. For example, while we have been able to address the buying problem for a consumer, give them choices and give them an experience where they can buy an insurance policy, I think we are still working hard towards putting up the services side of the story on a digital platform. So that's an area demands a lot of growth and evolution. Especially, let's think about that you bought health insurance and then you want to basically go for claim for health insurance. How easy it's right now? It's still very troublesome for most of the consumers. So how we can actually make it more consumer centric and make it convenient for consumer and make it good for insurer. That's the target that we are having right now. And imagine if you're having customers who are coming from digital platforms, you're bound to have a lower claim ratios as well, good customers, less fraud happening around the consumer base. That is also eventually solving the problem of insurer as well. In short, we are handling both.
All right. Let me get in Nikhil's perspective on this question as well. Nikhil, your space, we see a lot of competitors there. How do you differentiate yourself?
I think our differentiating factor at the beginning was price. Back about 10, 11 years
Nikhil,
ago.
if you could get your video on, I believe your video is currently off. If you could turn your video on.
I think I'm having some issue with the network.
I see. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so back in the day, the differentiation was price. We were much cheaper than the incumbent players of the day. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've kind of transitioned into building better technology. In our industry, that equates to better charting, better analytics, research, order execution. So these are the things where we differentiate ourselves on today.
Okay. All right. Let's get into the last leg of questions from me, and then we'll go to the audience question. And this is to the banks, to Anita and Biju. Anita, banks have been known to hold back from FinTech collaborations. What are the possible reasons for this, and how can banks better integrate FinTech innovations in our opinion?
it is about
If you could repeat that, Anita. Unfortunately, your audio is again stuttering, so we couldn't hear you clearly. If you could start your answer again.
Yeah, so I'm saying that it's about getting like-minded partners, which have common goals. It's about having very clear strengths of each other, working together to resolve customer problems, and actually making a difference there. And I think most critically celebrating together. I think if all of these ingredients are there, definitely you will have a very good partnership in the banks and fintech.
Okay, Biju, your view on this?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Anita mentioned. It's like, to get like-minded partnerships. So the fintech may be having a very good idea, so that may be suitable or it should match with the strategy of the particular bank also. So if both makes together, then I don't think there are issues in having collaborations between banks and startups. And in the current time, no bank can shy away from partnering with the fintech also.
All right, so we've kind of broadly covered this topic from all the key players in this ecosystem. Let's see what the audience has to ask to our panelists. Let's bring in their questions. The first question comes from Shivam Maheshwari, and he's addressed this question to Saurabh. And it's an interesting one. He asked that while we're living in the era of voice, where AI is capable of handling almost every possible query, do you see one day technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant becoming virtual advisors and selling insurance policies in India basis customers' requirements, or is that too far away? What's your view on this, Saurabh?
Very interesting, I would say. I'd say insurance is a very involved topic in certain categories, I would say. For example, when you're buying term insurance, you are likely to claim for it when you are not in this world, right? So I would say for such an involved and complex topics, we are still far away from a situation where Alexa and other voice devices will start advising you. I would say rather not to do that, at least for next 5 to 10 years. But you never know. I mean, technology has always been.
Chatbots are coming up. People cannot differentiate between them and human interactions.
Correct. But for simpler product, I would say it's a possibility. For example, car insurance, bike insurance, and any small cancer insurance, where you don't need to really get into the micro terms and conditions, you can eventually start buying it over voice. But for complex products, I can't imagine. I'm being very practical right now. Let's see how things shape up in future.
All right. The next question comes from Raghav Rachuri, and he says that we've seen growth of fintech companies in the past 5 years, and that has resulted in a multiplicity of apps and tools. Too many apps, too many tools. So can we expect some sort of a consolidation of these solutions and look for standardized products emerging from not only domestic financial services, but international banking and other financial services? Peter, you have a view on this. Do we see consolidation happening in terms of products being offered to customers so that it's more logical for them, or do we just keep seeing variety of products coming into the market and let's see what sticks? That's what companies think. What do you think about this?
What we've seen in the UK is a mixture of both, but I would actually say more collaboration and actually more development of products and services between more established financial players and some of the technology firms and fintechs coming through. I think where we've seen the greatest success is where the two have managed to come together and improve on perhaps some of the legacy of the traditional finance, if you want to call them that. But what we're also seeing, of course, is that proliferation of new products and services. And we talked about digital ID earlier, and we've spoken about AI as well, where that accessibility to finance via fintech is key. And I think that's the interesting point for us. Is how does open banking and how do those products enable greater consumer engagement with financial services?
All right, Puneet, do you have anything to add to this point?
No, Gautam, not anything very specifically at this point of time.
No, you don't see consolidation happening. You considering the amount of options people have in the market, What do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to be the Darwinian theory of evolution, the survival of the fittest. I don't necessarily consolidation may happen, because consolidation is something where I think there has to be complementary set of services which completes either a suite of products or a portfolio or a suite of service offerings. Right now, so the question which arises is that when we look at the broader set of fintechs, to what extent is there differentiation? And if you remember when earlier Peter also spoke about open banking, especially the way it's been done in the UK, you can access through open banking a suite of products without actually needing to consolidate. So I don't really see consolidation being a big thing. There will be some of them will fall by the side, some of them will prosper for sure. But I'm not really seeing this as a consolidation game. It's more, as I said, survival of the fittest.
All right, I'll take one last question from the audience, and this I think comes from Rakesh Lunavat, and he says that there's still a lot to be done in many sectors, and he focuses his question especially on banking when it comes to eKYC process, where it's tedious, where a visit is still necessary, original documents asked, errors in data are there. So when do we see all the promise of AI and ML and everything actually working to solve these problems? So that's an important question. I mean, notionally as a concept, it appears to be great. But for a consumer, it at the end of the day boils down to, has my experience become easy, or do these problems still remain? Anita, you have a point of view on this as to when will we see tangible changes whereby it's guaranteed, it's as one of the panelists mentioned, we need stability, which is a core component of improving this business. So when do we see that kind of stability of experience? Anita, do you have a point of view on this?
I would hope so. I would agree the point.
If you can speak into the mic, Anita. Unfortunately, your audio is again is in a bit of a stutter. If you can speak into the mic again.
Yeah, so I agree with the point which the person of the audience has made. And I think it's a constant but I think we talk about various different types of data per customer. We talk about different financial institutions with the data into central databases. There are always changes, so these mobile numbers and passport numbers keep changing.
Unfortunately, we again seem to be having the audio issue with you, Anita. So we couldn't hear most of what you said clearly. So I'll address that question to Biju. Biju, a quick view from you, and as to the experience, the control of data, which gives a stable experience to the end customer. When do we see that happening?
Yeah, Gautam, so to the point or to the question which you raised regarding opening an account without having a paper or without going to the bank premises. So already a lot have changed, and now with the eKYC and thereafter the video KYC mode. So now anyone can open an account, do transactions, everything right from their home without visiting the branch or even without submitting a paper. So everything can be done electronically without any issues, seamlessly, and can transact. Complete KYC process can be done online through the process called the video KYC. So
all right.
Yeah.
Let's see how things progress there. And as an end consumer, I myself am looking forward to the day where these experiences become seamless, they become stable. But we have completely run out of time when it comes to the discussion leg of this talk. But before we conclude, we are joined by Neha Sampath, Senior Sector Manager, Financial and Professional Services at the British High Commission. She's here to present the closing remarks. Over to you, Neha.
Thank you, Gautam, and thank you to all our esteemed panelists. Indeed, a very exciting discussion. And I'm delighted to join all of you today for this fantastic webinar on FinTech, which we've organized jointly with our media partner, Mint. So thank you very much, Mint. As most of you know, DIT helps businesses export, drive inward and outward investment, negotiates market access and trade deals, and we also champion free trade. And obviously, my role here entails working with companies like you to facilitate trade and investment between the UK and India. And thanks to our esteemed panel members, we've witnessed a very exciting and informative discussion on how fintechs are changing the financial services landscape globally and the role that they are playing in financial inclusion. So, of course, finance and innovation are central to our trade priorities, and fintech is the one that brings both of these together. Especially in this challenging times of COVID-19, fintech is even more important to facilitate financial inclusion, credit flow, and insurance. Collaboration for us is important in both directions, and some of our initiatives like the India-UK Joint Working Group or the announcement at the Economic and Financial Dialogue between both the chancellors saying we are keen to reduce the cost of remittances and we are working towards this are very important to us. We continue to strengthen this bilateral relationship, bringing together the fintech expertise of India and UK to drive this growth and prosperity. It is indeed great to see continued interest from UK companies in this market, and we at DIT are committed to support you with your business objectives in India. Looking ahead, we are taking everything that we've heard today and continue to work